All right, guys, welcome to Chapter 4, Lesson 4. These are the solutions to pages 26 and 27 for multiplying integers. Just a friendly reminder, you should be here to check your work after you've completed everything or to obtain just a little bit of help. You shouldn't be here simply to copy all the solutions. So let's begin. The first section we're going to look at are numbers 1 through 7. For number 1, we are asked, what can you conclude about the signs of two integers whose product is A, positive? So if I have a positive solution, what could I conclude about the two signs? Well, I'm either a positive number times, that's a dot, times another positive number, or I'm a negative times another negative. You don't need to put a 1 there. Just do this. Negative times a negative. Another way you can say this is you can say that both signs are the same. Both signs are the same. Okay, so that's part A. For number 1, part B, what can we conclude about the signs of two integers when we're negative? So for part B, to get a negative solution, we're going to have different signs. For example, a negative times a positive, or we're going to have a positive times a negative. In both cases, our solution is going to be negative. And again, another way you can write this is the two integers, I'm going to abbreviate here, two integers have different, abbreviate again, signs. Okay, two integers would have different signs. So either way, you can write out the model, but just make sure you could explain your model if you do so, or you can just write it in words. Or if you want to go one step further, do the model and the words. Okay, number 2, write two integers whose product is negative. The numbers themselves really don't matter. So we can do negative 2 times 3. Okay, my signs are different, so the answer is going to be negative 2 times 3 is 6. Another example we can do is 4 times negative 5. Okay, the signs are different. The solution is negative. 4 times 5 is 20. All right, again, the numbers don't matter. What matters is you have one negative, one positive. One negative, one positive. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3 through 5. Tell whether the product is positive or negative without multiplying and explain your reason. So for number 3, the solution is negative. And how do we know that? So how could I tell? Well, if I take a look at the numbers, I have one positive and one negative. My signs are different. So how do I know it's negative? The two integers have different signs. Okay, number 4. I have a negative 5 and a negative 7 being multiplied together. So my solution is going to be positive. How do I know? The two signs are the same. When I have two of the same signs, my solution is always positive. And finally, number 5. I have a negative and a positive, so my solution is going to be negative. How do I know that? The two integers have different signs. Let me just move that up for you. Okay, so that's 3, 4, and 5. Okay, number 6 and 7, tell whether the statement is true or false and explain your reason. So for number 6, the product of 3 positive integers is positive. Well, we can do an example. 2 times 1 times 3. Is this solution going to be positive or negative? Well, positive times positive would be positive. And then this positive 2 times 3 is going to be positive 6. So true or false? True. Because a positive times a positive equals a positive. Oops. So the 2 times 1 would be positive 2, and then positive times this positive 3 here still equals positive. If you want to write this in a more simple version, you can just say all of the numbers are positive. I really don't like that because if they were all negatives, I just don't want you getting in the habit of that. Our integer rules only work for 2 integers at a time, which is why here I talked about the 2 times the 1, a positive times a positive. And then when you get your solution for 2 times 1, you take that answer, whether it was positive or negative, and multiply it to the third number. So you look at 2 numbers at a time, okay? So I would rather you look at number 6 and 7 this way than looking at all the signs at one time, okay? So number 7, I'm going to delete number 6. So if you need it, pause now. So here's number 7. The question states the product of 3 negative integers is positive. Well, let's do a simple example. Okay, they don't have to be hard. So what I like to do is take these like abstract questions and boil them down into something that you can relate to. So this is easier to look at than all these words. So like I said for number 6, we multiply 2 numbers at a time. So all of these have the same sign, don't they? And hopefully you're saying yes. So most students will assume that the solution's positive. It's what you taught me, Mrs. Braun. Same signs, positive. Those rules only work for 2 integers at a time. So let's do the math first. What's negative times a negative? And hopefully you're saying positive. So if this 2 wasn't there, let's get rid of that for a second, just ignore it. So look over here, this -1 times -1 has a solution of 1 when you multiply it. The product is 1. Now we're going to take this product of 1 and multiply it to -2. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this guy back. Now, what is a positive? You notice I'm only looking at 2 numbers at a time. What is this positive 1 times this -2? And the solution is -2. So to answer number 7, the product of 3 negatives is a positive. It's false. And why is it false? Because a negative times a negative equals positive. Then it's this step now. This is a positive times a negative. Then a positive times a negative equals a negative and not a positive. Okay, so there's number 7. Let's move on. Now we're looking at 16 to 23 all. Number 16. Okay, we have a negative times a positive, so 16 is going to be negative. 5 times 10 is 50. So do you notice I'm looking at this in 2 parts, signs, then numbers. Number 17, it's negative times 0. I don't even care what the numbers are at this point. If I'm multiplying by 0, the answer is 0. Number 18, there's no such thing as -0 or +0, just 0. So students for number 18 have a habit of writing 0 because those adding rules have been drilled into your head. But remember, we're multiplying. So what's a negative times a positive? Negative, and 9 times 9 is 81. Okay, for number 19, we have a positive times a negative. Signs are different, negative. 15 times 2 is 30. So my solution is -30. Number 20, I have a negative times a positive, so the answer is negative. And 10 times 11 is 110. 21, I have a negative times a negative, so my answer is positive. And 13 times 6, I get 78. Okay. For 22, I have a positive times a negative. The signs are different, so my answer is negative. And then 14 times 7 is 98. So I get -98. All right, and for number 23, let's see what we got here. I have a negative times a negative, so the answer is positive 121. If you wrote 111, it's a common mistake, but not correct. So thank you for your effort. Anything that you got wrong, make sure along the way we are fixing and we are correcting. Okay, that's the purpose of this video. When we are done, all of your work should be correct. So I'll say it here before we go any farther. If you have questions on things, make sure you highlight that question, or make sure you make note on the top of your paper. Ask Mrs. Sprons for help for numbers 1, 5, 24, whatever. And we can go through those questions on our one-on-one session. Okay. Here we're looking at 24 and 25. So for 24, you burn 10 calories each minute you jog. What integer represents the change in your calories after you jog for 20 minutes? So the word burn is a negative because you're losing. So I burn 10 calories, so -10 times, I'm going for 20 minutes. So -10 times 20 is negative because the signs are different. 2 times 1 is 2. And I've got 2 zeros altogether, 200. So I will burn 200 calories in 20 minutes of jogging. Okay, number 25. About 60,000 acres of wetlands are lost each year in the United States. What integer represents the change of wetlands after 4 years? So we lose 60,000 acres. So 60,000 is negative times 4. So I know these numbers look huge, but I promise you this is the same as doing 6 times 4. Take a look at the 6 and the 4, and we get 24. We have a negative times a positive. So let's put a negative here. Now, how many zeros do we have all together? Let me just clean this up a little. How many zeros do we have all together in the numbers I'm multiplying? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just going to write those in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's put some commas in there. So we lose about 240,000 acres of wetlands in 4 years. Okay. We're going to look at 26 to 38 evens now. Remember, anything that's done incorrectly, please be sure you are fixing and correcting. If you have questions, please be sure you make note of those problems. All right, so let's begin with number 26. So for 26, we have 3 times -8 times -2. These are parentheses here. Since it's all multiplication, the order doesn't matter. What I like to try to do is put numbers together so it makes it easier for me to work with them. So I know if I multiply 3 times 8 and get 24, like that's just a lot harder to work with than if I took 3 times -2. Do you have to do it that way? No, just multiply the 3 numbers. It doesn't matter. So 3 positive times 2 negative is negative. 3 times 2 is 6. Now I'm going to take -6 and multiply it by that -8. So negative times negative is positive, so my final solution is 48. So some of you are asking, well, I did 3 times -8 and got -24, and then multiplied -24 by 2. Well, that's fine too. We're using the commutative and associative properties of multiplication. So either process is completely fine. So you'll get 48 either way. So that was number 26. We are doing just even, so let's take a look at 28. So we have -3 times -5 times -4. Okay, so I'm going to do these two first. You can start at any point you wish. So -3 times, or you can just put a parenthesis there, negative times negative is positive. So 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, now we're going to take a look at these two numbers now in purple. I have a negative and a positive. So my solution will be negative because these two signs are different. You're not going to look up here. You're going to look here in the purple. So my two signs are now different. I get negative. 3 times 2 is 6, and add in that 1 0. So my final solution is a -60. And I know there's some of you out there, you're like, Mrs. Franz, I did -3 times -5 first. Great. They're going to get 15. And then you take that 15 and times it to -4. Different signs as negative, you're still going to get 60. Okay? Either way is fine. I'm sure there's others of you out there who looked at the numbers differently, and maybe you did the 4 and the 3 first. Any way is fine. Okay, that was 28. Let's go to 30. So we have -6 times 3 times -2. Okay, so let's just go left to right. -6 times 3, different signs, I get negative. 6 times 3 is 18. Now I'm going to multiply this by -2. So since my signs are the same, my answer is positive, and 18 times 2 is 36. Okay, that was 30. Let's go to 32. So 32, we have in parentheses -4 to the second power. So what this means in expanded form is 2 of this entire parenthesis. So 1 times 2. So -4 times -4, which equals 16. All right, if you put negative, that's not correct because I want this entire parenthesis twice. Okay, and actually it transitions nicely. Let's take a look at 34. If you look at 34, the 8 is not in parentheses. So what this is saying for 34 is, what is the opposite of 8 squared? Well, 8 squared means -8 times 8. So 8 times 8 is 64, and the opposite of that is -64. Okay, so that's number 34. For 36, where are we here? Okay, we have -5 squared times 4. So this is saying take the opposite of 5 squared and then times it by 4. So we are going to use PEMDAS. Order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So no parentheses, we do have exponents. So 5 squared means negative or opposite of 5 times 5, and then we're going to times by 4. So 5 times 5 is 25, and the opposite of that is -25 times 4. Well, if you think of 25 as a quarter, like 25 cents, if I gave you 4 quarters or 4 25-cents, you would have 100 cents negative because the signs are different. Okay. And finally, we have, that was 36. We're going to take a look at 38. So -2 times -7 equals -14. So describe and correct. I love these. So we need to describe what the error was. I keep forgetting the R in describe. I don't know what my issue is. Okay, we're going to describe and we're going to correct. For these questions, I call these like park practice questions because it forces you to look at questions and analyze them and be able to explain what's going on. So in my past teaching experiences, the students will tell me that the solution's fine, but there's something wrong with the problem. Well, that's not how you're to look at these. So when you look at these describe and correct questions, this is the question you're being asked, what's being highlighted. You need to figure out what is wrong with everything after that. So what I encourage students to do is do the corrections first. So start here and then go back and describe what the mistake was. So what do we know about a negative times a negative? And hopefully you're shouting it out. Hopefully you're saying, hey, it should be positive. So -2 times -7, it equals to 14 because the signs are different. So now what you're going to do is go to the describe part here and describe. You're going to say, I'm going to type this instead of handwrite it. The student kept the same sign, but when you multiply two signs that are the same, the product should be positive, not negative. I'm going to move this up for you. Oops. There you go. So that's the describe part. Okay, if you need to pause, go right ahead and do so. We're going to move forward. Okay, here we have 40 to 42 all. The word evaluate means to solve, find the solution. Okay, so evaluate the expression. So anywhere we see A, we're going to replace it with -2. Anywhere we see B, we replace that letter with 3. And anywhere we see C, we replace it with -8. Okay, so let's take a look at 40. I have students make parentheses to represent where the numbers are going to go. For example, A, B together, this means A, multiply it to B. Okay, we're not going to just take -2 and -8 and kind of mash them together. So the value of A goes in there times the value of B goes in there. And I know for 40, it doesn't really make sense to do so, but as we get bigger, like 41 and 42, it makes a lot of sense to have these cups or parentheses because there's going to be a lot of signs sprinkled everywhere, and this will help you make sure that you're not leaving negatives behind. So in here, we're going to put the value of A, which is -2, and in here, we're going to put the value of B, which is 3. So now we have -2 times 3, -6. Okay, 41. Remember, anything you have questions on, make sure you are marking them. We have the absolute value of A squared times C. For my visual friends, put that multiplication dot in there. You notice in the original question it's not there, but there's nothing between the A squared and the C. So it's understood that we are multiplying. So if you need that symbol, put it there to help you remember or serve as a reminder that you are multiplying. So the absolute value of A squared times C an absolute value. Okay. The value of A is -2, and the value of C is -8. So we're going to do everything in here first. Let me change color. It's hard to see. So we're going to do exponents first because exponents in order of operations come first. Then we multiply. So this says take everything in this parenthesis twice. So -2 times -2 is 4. So an absolute value, we have 4 times -8. Okay, now we multiply. So with the different signs, we get an answer of negative, what's going on here? We get -32, but remember, this is all an absolute. So what does that mean? Now that you got your answer, just take the absolute value of -32. Just a friendly reminder going back to lesson 1, absolute value measures how far you are to 0. So if I'm at -32, how many little steps do I take to get to 0? And the solution here is 32. Remember, it's always the positive solution. So if you need any of this, pause now because we're going to go on to 42. Okay, there we are. So 42, we have the opposite of A times B cubed, or to the third power, minus A times C. Do you notice I added the time symbols once again? Right, so what we're going to do is create our setup. So we have the opposite of A times B to the third power minus A times C. Now I know there's some of you out there like, what's the point? Why can't I just put the numbers in there? And if you're comfortable and you're making sure that your negatives aren't getting lost, go right ahead. Also, students kind of get mixed up over here with the exponents. So it's really important that you do start with this setup and make sure that, especially when you get to the exponents, that they're being carried out the right way. So A is worth -2, B is worth 3, and then over here we got an A, which is -2, and over here we have C, which is -8. So remember our order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So I ask this question frequently, and I ask students, do I have parentheses? And they turn around, they're like, yes. But a parenthesis, for example, like this, that's just a placeholder. It's just a number. There's nothing else going on in here. There's no operation. So I know I have parentheses sprinkled across number 42, but there aren't any operations happening in any of those parentheses. So when I ask, is there parentheses? Well, of course there are, but do I have any operations going on in there? And I do not. So are there parentheses? Yes, but is there anything to do in any of those parentheses? And the answer is no. So no parentheses. There's nothing to do in any of those. Do I have exponents? Yes, I do, right here. So the opposite of -2 times 3 to the third power. 1, 2, 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3, 27. Okay, and then we're just going to finish up going left to right, minus -2 times -8. So now we're going to multiply and divide. Let's move this down a little. So -2 times 27, that is negative because the signs are different, 54. So the opposite of -54 minus, we're going to do those two, and 2 times 8, both have the same sign, so I get 16. Okay, now we're going to handle these signs. The opposite of a -54, It's 54 minus 16. So at this point, you can do one of two things. You can just take 54 and minus 16, or you can rewrite this as 54 add the opposite. Okay, so at this point, it's up to you on whether you leave it this way or rewrite it this way. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to subtract here. Here, subtract because bigger minus smaller, or remember in this scenario, we subtract because the signs are different. Okay, so 5 becomes 4, this becomes 14. So 14 minus 6 is 8, 4 minus 1 is 3. So final solution is 38. Congratulations, that was a really tough one. All right, so we are down to the last 3 questions here. Hang in there, you guys are doing great. For number 45, oh, that's kind of tough to look at, isn't it? Let's see, there we go. So you lose 4 points each time you attend gym class without sneakers. You forget your sneakers 3 times. What integer represents the change in your points? So losing 4 points is represented as -4. And you forget 3 times. So you lose -4 3 times, or -12. Remember, signs are different. 4 times 3 is 12. So the height of an airplane for number 46 during a landing is given by 22,000 plus -480 times t, where t is time in minutes. Copy and complete the table. Okay, so just so you understand this, 22,000, here we go, 22,000 plus -480, oops, 480t. So what's really happening is we're adding on a negative, and all of you know when you add on a negative, you're really subtracting. So every minute, this plane comes down 480 feet. So it's up in the sky, 22,000 feet. And every minute, it comes down closer to the ground at a rate of 480 feet per minute. So what this chart is saying here is after 5 minutes, where in the sky is this plane? So everything that I'm doing here, you're going to do. I made a chart down here, and we're just going to fill it in as we go. So we're going to take 22,000 and add -480 times 5. Okay, so remember, we multiply first and then we subtract. So let's see, 480 times 5, 0. 5 times 8 is 40. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 4, 2,400. So we have 22,000 plus 2,000, -2,400. Okay, and if you're wondering where the negative came from, I have 2 signs here that are different. So a positive times a negative is -2,400. Okay, so now what we're going to do is take 22,000 and subtract 2,400. Okay, so 0, 0, let's borrow, make that a 1, make this a 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. We're going to borrow again. This becomes 11 minus 2 is 9, 1. So now, in our chart, let me just change to a darker color. After 5 minutes, we're at 19,600 feet. Okay, now we're going to do this whole thing again 3 more times. Once for 10, 15, and 20 minutes. Okay, so copy your formula down. And this time, we're going to use 10. So 22,000, don't like that color. 22,000 plus -480 times 10. So 22,000 plus, we're going to take 480 and times it by 10. So first thing, we know the answer is negative. What's 48 times 1? Hopefully you're saying 48, and then I'm going to add on 2 zeros. Okay, now that we've multiplied, we can subtract the 4,800 from the 22,000. So we're going to take 22,000, and we're going to subtract 4,800. So 0, 0, make that a 1. So 10 minus 8 is 2. Let's borrow again. 11 minus 4, where am I? 7. And then 1 minus nothing is 1. So now I'm at 17,200. So down here, 17,200. Okay, now we're going to go to 15 minutes. I know it's time consuming and it really tests your patience, but just hang in there. You guys are doing great. So we're going to take 22,000 and add it to negative 480 times 15. So let's figure this out. So 22,000 plus negative something. So let's do 480 times 15. So we're going to start with the 5. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 8 is 40. Carry the 4. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 4 is 24. Okay, now we're going to put a 0 here because we're done with the 5. We go to the 1. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, now let's add. We get 0, 0, 8. All right, let's take a look at 8 plus 4. We get 12. Okay, 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So after 15 minutes, we are, sorry, so this is negative 7,200. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take 22,000. We're going to subtract 7,200. We get 0, 0. Let's borrow. This becomes 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. Borrow again. We get 4. So we get 14,800. Okay, and finally, we're just going to do the last one for 20 minutes. So please copy this formula one last time. This time we're going to replace T for 20. So 22,000 plus negative 480 times 20. We're going to start with this part first. So 22,000 plus, we know it's going to be negative. Now let's see if we can do this without pen and paper. We're going to do 48 times 2. So 8 times 2 is 16, carry 1. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1. So that's 96, and there's 2 zeros. Okay, and if you don't like it that way, just multiply it long ways like we have been. Now we're going to take 22,000 and minus 9,600. Okay, 0, 0. We're going to borrow. So 10 minus 6 is 4. Borrow again. Okay, so after 12 minutes, after 20 minutes, we're at 12,400. So that's what your table should look like. And all the work should be present. Okay, we don't randomly just get these numbers. We work really hard for them. So estimate how many minutes it takes for the plane to land and explain your reasoning. All right, so if they say estimate, so what I'm thinking is it's going to take another 20 minutes for the plane to land, because if this is roughly, what's going on here? This is roughly 1,200, or sorry, 12,000 feet, and I need to get to 22,000 feet. So it's going to take roughly another, it's going to take less than 20 more minutes for the plane to land, because if my total is 22,000, at 20 minutes I've already descended about 12,000. So let's see what we get here. I might even change my answer. So I have 10,000 more feet to go roughly. So another 10,000 feet. So yeah, it'll take just under 20 minutes more to descend this plane. Okay, and I believe we have one more on this page here. So inline skates. In June, the price of a pair of inline skates is $165. The price changes each of the next 3 months. So in June, they cost $165. In July, it's $165 minus 12. So 165 minus 12. So they're $153. Let me see, I'll type that in and shrink it down because my handwriting, I know, is kind of rough. Okay, and then in August, it's 165 plus 2 times negative 12. So we're going to take 165 plus 2 times negative 12. So we're going to multiply first, which is negative 24 plus 165. So what we'll do here is subtract these two since the signs are different. So we take 165 minus 24, and we get 141. Okay. So 141, and then for the third month, for September. Okay, so for September, we're going to take a look here. We're going to do 165 plus 3 times negative 12. So we're going to multiply first and then subtract. So plus 12, a positive times a negative is a negative. 12 times 3 is 36. So since the signs are different in addition, we're going to subtract. We're going to take 165 and minus 36. So we're going to borrow, make this a 5 and this a 15. That becomes 9, 2, 1. So we get $129. Okay. Describe the change in price in the inline skates for each month. Okay, so each month we saved an extra what? So if you take 165 and subtract these two and subtract 153, you should get 12. If you take 153 and 141 and subtract, you get 12. So each month we save $12. Okay. All right, this reaches the end of our video for Chapter 1, Lesson 4, Multiplying Integers. Remember, if you have any questions, jot them down and let me know. Great work, everyone.